Hello,
Hello,
everyone.
everyone,
No, let's do it
and
again. How about wait. 1, 2, 3. Hello,
hello,
everyone.
everyone, and
Welcome
welcome
to the
to the
Social Pillar,
Social Pillar,
an
an
ongoing conversation
ongoing conversation about
about the
the
value
value of role-playing games
role-playing games and their
and their craft,
crafts, cultures,
cultures, and
and communities
communities
in
in
our
our world.
world. That
Woo!
that was beautiful. We
Okay, I was really
definitely
right.
did not need to rehearse that at
No,
all.
no,
Nailed
no,
it.
nail in one. This is it. Hello, everyone.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome.
Hello, Thea. How are you?
I'm very well. Hello, Ian. How are you?
I am well, and welcome everybody to the Social Pillar, as we just heard. Welcome to our chat. Before we jump ahead, because we're looking forward to seeing everyone there. Renato, we can see you, Sammy Slick, and everyone else who's there. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that we are coming to you from the Aboriginal lands of this nation, and I'm coming to you from Darugland. We would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land that we are streaming to you from and pay our respects to elders past and present, extending those respects to any First Nations people who are watching. We tonight are two forever Games
And then
Masters.
there was two.
Conversation to my
We don't know what side
to my
we're
right.
on.
No, to my right, I have my good friend.
It's me, OMGM, also known as Thea. I am on the right. I think I'm on your right, their left.
Yeah.
I'm on the screen somewhere, and I am happy to be here. I am a GM. I run a lot of games online, and sometimes I run them in person. I stream where I can. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And who is this on my left? Look at that.
On your left, that would be me, and that would be Ian. Hi, guys. Ian Zammit here from Roleplay Experience, director and facilitator, professional games master, and dedicated to connecting people via role-playing games, one table at a time. I've run actually recently just run the first adult game one-shot introduction to D&D at Penrith Library. It was a blast, and we're going to do another one in March. So if anyone's keen. But just very excited to talk.
Yeah, library games are fun, aren't they?
Yes. Oh, so good. And
and chaotic. And very chaotic.
which is awesome, mad. But yeah, we are missing our usual companion at arms.
Our centre is gone.
What's happened to him, Thea?
Oh, well, so Jared and I decided that, we should go out and have a coffee. And while we were out for coffee, a really lovely person came up to me and said, "How much for the handsome man?" And I said, "Well, 2 Mustangs." He went, "1 Mustang." I said, 1 Mustang. So I have a new car, which I'm super thrilled with. But unfortunately, Jared won't be joining us this evening.
Okay, in one universe, that is true. On the other side of it, we do actually have Jared just watching us from afar, as well as he wonderfully surveys and operates the tech behind all of this. Thank you, Jared. He's not feeling the best today, so he's taking care of us to bring our form of madness to this chat. So we hope we can see you back here next week, mate.
Yeah, which is very kind of him to sort of be the voice, the mind, the all-seeing eye. The all-seeing chef? Putting the pieces together and behind the scenes cooking up a marvelous meal of all of the intense chaos and stuff.
Chef, hopefully the Mustang can be returned or something. Anyway.
Yes, well, potentially. I did have a Mustang, Sammy. Unfortunately, I did sell it when I went to film school. But it was a GT. It was a very nice Mustang. I liked it a lot. 2019, the year before COVID year. Anyway, welcome to our show. We'll be talking about cars.
Well, kind of. We're going to segue from cars into, funny as introducing to new systems, we'll say it. Actually, today, we're going to be talking about, we had the term prepisode that kept coming up for us. And that's really, we're talking about the methods and experience of how we as game masters prepare for tabletop role-playing game sessions. And I specifically to introduce new players to tabletop role-playing games. So we're keen to learn from what steps each of us go through for how do we set up a single session introduction, also called a one-shot, so that the first timers have a chance to understand what on earth this game is, how to play it, and give, from our perspective, what can we do to give them a really good experience, a valuable first experience of role-playing games. So we want to talk about the experiences of introducing TTRPGs, not just D&D, but we will start with that because that's a really good focus. And we're keen to hear from you in the chat about your experiences and questions about how you introduced Dungeons and Dragons or other RPGs to new players. Perhaps identify across this discussion key steps that are common across those introductions to new people. What do you think, Thea?
Yeah, look, I think it's a really interesting one because we have spoken in a number of episodes about, preparing for a game, running a session 0. And this is not just us repeating ourselves. We're not, that does happen. We could run a clip show where we just, go, oh, flashbacks. But we actually wanted to look at this a bit from a slightly different perspective. So looking at things from a slightly more technical side of things, like what we do for bringing in people to a one-shot, but also putting ourselves in the mindset of being a new first-time DM. So trying to think about, take ourselves back. This is me going back in time. Pretty good, huh? Effects. That effect budget was not wasted, but definitely. Oh, poor Ian has to put up with my chaos unsupported.
I'm learning. Okay, I want to see how I can engage.
You're doing good.
And also, Jared's on the chat. Jared's on the chat, so he can chat to us, which is great.
He is there, yeah, and he can dance, get the disco lights going. Anyway, not like me to get distracted.
Do you want to start? Tell us about.
We'll start.
Your experience. What's it like for you? What do you go through when you're introducing a role-playing game in like a short session? I actually was thinking, I don't know if this works for you, but we were looking at it like for Collecticon, when we have a 2-hour session to introduce people. What do you go through to prepare for a game like that?
I actually think it's interesting because we both run library games as well. And I'm not sure how yours is set up, but in my community, it's still one-shots. And I think that when we talk about preparing for the game, for running the game and bringing in new people, the principles are very much the same whether you're doing it as a one-shot in person or when you're doing a one-shot online.
Yeah.
So I think that's it gives it and I am the one-shot queen. I think I spent all my time last year talking about one-shots and one-shots and one-shot this and one-shot that and welcome to the one-shot cult. That would be an awesome name for a cult, the one-shot cult. We should put that in a game.
Okay, noting it down as a potential discussion.
Are you actually taking notes or are you just pretending to take notes to placate me? Because I would be okay with that.
If I said I was pretending, you know that I'm still taking notes anyway. So yeah. You are the note taker, which I think we all appreciate greatly. Single bullet. Yeah, I like that. Single bullet cult. That sounds like a steampunk kind of thing, Renato. I think we should definitely go there. But yes, I think that's a good idea. And we talk about sort of one-shots. I feel relatively comfortable talking about one-shots. I feel more uncomfortable talking about campaigns. And I think, so we're going to talk about D&D, but I'd actually like to talk about what happens when it's not D&D as well. Yeah.
Because I think one of the things is that with all of the different live play shows, with the podcasts, with the growing popularity of live shows like at conventions, presentation, that's not the word I'm after, shows.
Yeah.
Demonstration. Anyway, that.
Yeah.
That thing. Smile and nod, everybody.
Yes.
And you in chat. I want to see you nodding.
Yeah.
But yes. So when I think everybody, my brain also shut down for a second there. Doing good. Little buzz. Reset. So when thinking about setting up for one-shots and, going to run that, I think everyone is fairly familiar with the basic mechanics of D&D. I think a lot of people will come into one-shots, come into conventions, and they will have generally some idea in their mind of how they expect that game to go and whether And I think because people come to one shots because they actually want to try out the game. And we
Okay.
know at Collecticon, we've had a lot of people come in saying, oh, I've always wanted to play. This has given me an opportunity. Same when putting out notes in the community or in different notice boards to run online one-shots. A lot of the people you get through are relatively new to playing but are familiar with the system. So I think a lot of people would understand the D20 system. They understand there are skills. And they understand sort of that the DM will set the tone, that there are different phases. There's like role play phases, there's puzzle phases, there's combat phases. So I think people having that expectation can be helpful when you're looking at setting up that one shot that is D&D. Because people will have an understanding of the mechanics. So you may not have to spend as much time explaining the mechanics, or you can do it as you play. Whereas if you're looking at a different system, say Star Trek Adventures, Blades in the Dark, Call of Cthulhu, Alien role-play games, they've actually got quite different mechanics. And even things like some of the D20 games, you don't want to roll high, you want to roll low. So it's a complete inversion of what many people are used to. It's like, oh, I got a nat 20. That's bad.
It's like you were saying, there is a bit of the sense of D&D in the zeitgeist in terms of some terminology. Like NPC, that term has been used in so many role-playing games, the actual term, like in computer games, but that all came from D&D, leveling up. That came from D&D. So I see what you mean,
Yeah.
So looking at other games is a good idea, actually, for intro.
Well, I think, and when I said before, like taking myself back to the mindset when I started running, going back and running different systems, going through Blades in the Dark, going through Star Trek The Adventure, it does put you back in that space of when you're a new GM and you are kind of get to grips. And I think that's really helpful for setting up for a short system, because for yourself, you're looking at what are some of the rules that can be simplified? What are the mechanics that are core? So, what are the really important things that need to happen in this game? Like, people need to roll dice, and I think most players really want to roll dice. Nice clickety clacks. They're texturous and they're tasty. They're not tasty. Don't lick the dice, kids. But they're very physical and visceral. So I think you can't cut that out. But can I cut out the very complex rules around companions? Yeah, probably. When I look at help actions, am I going to be strict about how people can help and that takes their action even if they're not in combat? No. What are the key things? Can you help the other players? Yeah. That's going to assist the game to flow. And that's what I think is probably the core thing to me when coming in to set up a game for new players or a system that I'm unfamiliar with or that I'm anticipating the players are going to be unfamiliar with. It's those core mechanics, and it's always dice, right? I know they are not candy, both of you in chat.
Well, they can, but generally...
Yeah.
No, you want to hold on to them anyway because you're going to do them.
Yeah, interesting. Can you imagine having here's an idea for a game, new system, a game where the dice are candy, right? And you have a whole bunch of dice to start the game. But as you go through, you can choose to eat your dice, which detracts
and
from
it limits
the
what
dice
you can
pool
do
that you have to do. Yeah,
I do like that. Yeah, that's pretty good. And you can win dice as you go along. That sounds okay.
Yes. Yeah, okay. M&M Monster
Game
Minis.
System. Okay, then.
Yeah,
M&M
done.
Minis.
That's going to be coming out. We're going to have a Patreon. We'll have a Kickstarter. We're there. Food safety, who knows?
So we'll come back to that as a subject later.
Yeah, so for a core mechanic, so once we do the candy dice game, after that, so the core mechanics, the other thing that I like to think about is, do I want to start building in kind of a tiered approach to some of the mechanics? So thinking about D&D, for example, if I have a brand new group of people, and if I was perhaps a newer DM as well, I might look at spellcasting. And I saw Johnny Chiodini. They're an excellent DM. They have their own channel over on YouTube. I recommend you check them out. They do a lot of live plays, and they also run the games for Oxventure. They started with a group of players who had never played before. So when they were talking about spell slots, talking about hit points, didn't introduce spell slots as a mechanic until, they'd leveled up a couple of times. Possibly was a little late introducing them because I'm going to cast Eldritch Blast all the time. Wait, I can. I'm going to cast Thunderwave all the time. Thunderwave,
Yeah.
as an unlimited spell, is very, very powerful.
It's volatile, that's for
It
sure.
is volatile. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they shot each other. Or one of the players shot another player. Anyway, something
But that's
about
a funny
sitting on
thing
a
too,
metal.
because you're introducing just ideas, and it's like the basic idea is casting spells, and then
Yep.
as you go up, it's kind of like you said, tiered approach.
Yeah.
Completely agree. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that you can still keep the game fair, but it's not overloading people.
Yeah.
And I also will do that amongst players because sometimes when you have players at different levels of experience, you might, one of them's going to be tracking their spells, one of them won't be. One of them might have an effect on them, you know, they have a fear effect and they might forget and not include any of that. It's like, oh, you know what? You don't need to on this particular. Yeah, so it's that kind of tiered and titrated leveling of that, I think. But on the other side of that, I think it's also really important not to dumb things down too much for your anticipated group. Because I think players don't want to be patronized. And I've played in games where, and maybe it was just me, I am neurodiverse, I do experience the world a little differently, but I found the DM's approach to the new players incredibly patronizing.
Really?
Yeah.
What ways? What would you find as patronizing that you've experienced?
I think it's explaining things. Like you can explain things, but it was telling them how to do things, but not in a let's teach. It was you will do this, you will do this. It was very definite. It wasn't about a learning approach. It was a very didactic kind of you will play my game my way because this is the only way to play.
Yeah.
And you don't get to have opinions and you don't get to have thoughts. And I found that and also kind of disempowering. I think also that DM was of that school of DM versus players versus DM and players are all collaborative.
Yeah.
So I think there's probably elements of that as well. But I think that, so you don't want to dumb it down. Like you don't want to have a group of people who perhaps have watched Critical Role. You still want to use some mechanics. So I think, again, I feel like a broken record, but I like to come back to what are the core mechanics? What are the key bits of the game that need to happen? An example. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. I'll talk about that in a second. You gave me an idea. What was the example?
I was going to say, so for example, with Star Trek The Adventure that I'm running, I've got two experienced players, two experienced TTRPG but haven't played Star Trek before, and two very new players who've never played TTRPGs before in their lives. So I think for them, and also it's new to me, I'll be honest, and I hope none of my players are watching, I haven't read the book cover to cover. I haven't. There's a lot in there. And there's still some mechanics that I'm confused about. So I am, not building the expectation that we're going to hit those particular events that would entail using that mechanic. Like, for example, they don't have the starship yet. So the starship has its own stats and it has its own way to help players or help the situation or change the atmospheres and the traits that are going on. I haven't got them on a ship yet because I don't feel as a GM that I have a good enough handle on all of the mechanics to do with that.
Can I just jump in there, because that's so valuable what you've said, and particularly for new GMs, you don't need to know all the rules to start to play the game. So it seems like to me that it's like you were talking about before. I hope this helps as well. We were talking about before about when you are introducing the game so that you can get into it. You don't need to know all the rules, but you want to have a sense of some of the rules, the core mechanics, like you said.
Yeah.
But you said something also about there's some expectations people have about the game. So like people want to roll dice. That seems to be a thing that people have for role-playing games, or that sense of chance. So there are other expectations, and it feels like about the sense of the style of the game. And is that the kind of thing also that you'd want to introduce? Like if it's a Star Trek game, what are the things that you would expect to have in a role-playing game for that?
Yeah, it almost sounds like you're sort of asking about the expectations that go along with genre of your game.
Yeah, in a way,
And I think that that sort of has, I think there's two sides to that, which are important to consider when you're setting up for these things. It's
Mm,
what are genre expectations? So what do people expect of a sci-fi environment, for example, versus a fantasy environment?
yeah.
Um, and I know that D&D have tried to combine that with the Spelljammer, um, and also
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
automatons, automatons.
Yeah.
It's a word. We know words with all of that. So I know they have tried to bring some of that sort of steampunk into cross genres. But
Yeah.
what I find is interesting is that there's people fall back to that kind of. I think the D&D audience have a real expectation about the fantasy genre,
Mm,
and why I think you see elements of those things drawn into current games, a lot of the popular live plays or any of the podcasts, but
mm,
not. It doesn't sort of go through because I think the expectations of players shape that.
mhm.
Pulling that to the microcosm of a one shot, I
Yeah.
think when a person signs up to a specific game, they
Yeah.
have quite specific expectations. And I
Yeah.
don't think that a
Agreed.
one shot is the time that you want to try violating those expectations or pushing
Yeah.
things. That can be great in a campaign,
Mm,
that can work beautifully, I think. But I
mm,
don't think in a one shot. I think within a one shot, where you want to challenge your players is not with their kind of core expectations. I think it is you want to make situations, events, chance outcomes within
mm.
their expectation for a one shot.
Yeah. That's really great that you said that you
Mm.
don't want to challenge their core expectations in a way of the genre of that particular role playing game. Star Trek
Mm.
Adventures, I would not be playing like a Star Wars game, for example, because that's a
Yes,
different kind of feel. But you want to have that
absolutely.
sense of that group of people working together to try and
Yep.
explore and find solutions to strange problems and
Yeah.
things. That's different to the high fantasy D&D style of game, which you're going out
Yeah.
to fight evil or something like this,
Yeah.
or
Or
yeah,
even think Call of Cthulhu versus
yeah,
I actually don't know any shooter type role play games. There's like a Western steampunky one. But
oh yeah.
anyway, it's where the mechanics that are around injury and harm
There's
are
actually,
very different.
I'll give you one actually, and I've
Yeah.
played it. There's Cthulhu, but there's also Pulp Cthulhu, and Pulp is very Indiana Jones. So you
Yep.
find all of that kind of paranormal stuff, but it's like real gritty, and you can punch, and you can really get into with guns, blah blah, and you get injured, but it's less that fear of just absolute terror and going mad. That doesn't seem to
Yeah.
happen as much. But yeah, it's a
Yeah.
different feel completely.
It's that
Yeah,
different feel. And so I think that
yeah,
for the one shots, and also to bring new players in, you kind of want to give them what they're expecting.
yeah,
And also that makes it a lot easier too. In order to, go against or challenge a rule or expectation or something that's set up, you kind of, I think, need to have a good understanding of that.
yeah.
And there's some things in, say, Star Trek. Sorry, I'm playing a lot of Star Trek and thinking Star Trek at the moment. So it's
Yeah,
going to be my go-to example for quite a
that sounds
while.
great. Yeah,
Yeah. Um, but it is the expectations there is that you'll conform to Star Trek rules. So yes, there are combat mechanics. Not like Kirk, you have to rip your shirt. Although I feel like maybe that's one of the rules I haven't read in the book
if
yet.
you're
That if
playing
you do get in,
original series style of Star Trek,
hmm
maybe. Yeah, maybe.
yeah, down on the planet with the Gorn and the choreographed fighting.
That's it.
Ah,
Yeah, yeah.
But but I think that is it is different to you don't people are not going to play a Star Trek game expecting to go straight into war.
Yeah.
Um, whereas I think some people and a lot of the introductory modules are set up that for a D&D you go
Mm.
straight into some kind of combat encounter. And I think that's
Mm.
something else that I kind of would talk a bit about when bringing in new players
Mm.
is um what are the simple things to do but still feel like you have agency?
Yes.
And so I think when I'm planning a one shot, it's kind of a formula. I don't want it to sound like a formula because that sounds like it's very staid and flat.
There's always adaptation on the fly and
Yeah.
improvisation, but it's nice having a formula because actually, like you said, there's those expectations of
Yeah.
what is a D&D game, for example. Yeah.
Yeah.
What would
So I
the
think
formula? What's your formula that you have?
when I go into it, I will always want to have, I aim to have in any of the one shots I run anything that's 2 hours to kind of 5 hours, I'll just vary the number. I'll have at
Mm.
least one combat encounter planned,
Yeah.
one opportunity for role play,
Mhm.
and I'll come back to talk about that in a sec, and a puzzle. because to
Yeah.
me, those are kind of the three pillars almost of
Yes. Three pillars.
a game. And I think in each of those examples, players get agency. They get a chance to do something and to be successful at it,
Mm.
And I think combat is quite straightforward to start with. The most rules are around combat, in D&D at least. The most mechanics are there. The most doing cool stuff potential is there. So it'll have some kind of combat chain. Puzzles allow people who perhaps are quieter or didn't want to play kind of that melee kind of character to their moment to shine. And then the role play moments I put there because I think a lot of people, you play a role play game because you want to role play. And you might not. Yeah, I imagine so. I don't know.
It's the social side of it. When you say that as well, because it's like to be able to engage so that there's that engagement of a few different people in a social. Do you have like an example of what you have as an introductory role-playing scene?
Yeah. So I hate to say it, but I do have a couple of bare bones scenarios and stories that I may roll out every 6 months or so at different cons.
That's great. Yeah. I think it's important to have that as well, sort of to be able to jump back into if you need to. Yeah.
Yeah. So generally I like to start with the group already together. And either traveling somewhere or it's cliche, but in a prison cell somewhere or waking up around a campfire so that there is that fade from black moment set up in the storytelling for the one shot. Yeah. And it's like, oh, so tell us what the other players see. And that gives them then a chance to do a little bit of role play, talk about their character, but also doesn't push people too far into that. For the example with the Star Trek game, I started with the voiceover of the Stardate blah, blah, blah situation type stuff. But it was a group brought together. So it's as you step through the airlock, what do people see? So that's how I tend to start. And for a one shot, I'll often have some kind of minor combat or challenge block planned quite straight up. Because I like the players to get into the habit of they can roll dice, they can use their skills. Hopefully they're successful. Hopefully I'll have a plan if they get stuck at the door. What is the bane of D&D players? Doors.
I was going to say
unlocked
scheduling.
Doors.
Yes.
Oh, scheduling, yes. Unlocked doors that open inwards.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. But yeah, so I'll have that, and then a puzzle or combat, and then the story will sort of evolve. And I usually try to have, for the high level games, there is a potential that characters will be killed off, but I will have a contingency of what happens because I don't just want somebody to be killed off. I still want people to be in the game. So I'll have a contingency, and then a number of options for an outcome depending on what happens. And then there's just the players have done something completely unexpected. Let's just roll with it. So there's always that. But that's kind of how I would set up in my mind to structure. And that's kind of the mindset I've taken to Star Trek Adventure, and also thinking about running Blades in the Dark. I know we want to find a DM, but if we start running it, because again, there's different mechanics in that I, as the game master, am not familiar with.
Yeah.
It's kind of that. There is one last thing. That I do like to sort of think about and have found myself thinking about again with Star Trek, because that is putting me in that mindset of the new GM or the newer GM. It's what I want the players to bring with them, because that varies. I don't know how you play your library games, and I'd be curious about that.
Yeah.
But for me, they need to come with a pre-made character. But I've sent them a link to a campaign in D&D Beyond where I can then see all of their characters. So at least we'll be able to see that. For Collecticon and cons like that, I will have pre-made characters that are hard copies and have a copy of that. And then for Star Trek, we actually went through the making characters. That wasn't a one-shot. If I was going to run it as a one-shot, I would give people pre-made characters. So I think that's that idea of sort of bringing what I want them to bring and what I'm comfortable with them bringing. So with the library games, because they know ahead of time what they're going to be playing, so they've got time to come up with that character. For cons, they don't have that. So I want to be able to give them a character, and I kind of don't want people bringing me a character that they've created, which is great, but that I know nothing about. because that could throw a whole bunch of curveballs.
That's funny, isn't it? Because for for a convention, it's generally because you don't know who's coming, and it's a roll up. So the expectation is, like you said, you want to be able to provide a very simple. This is a D&D game. This is kind of the expectation of the genre, the expected kind of characters that you would come across, and you want to have that as a certain level that's going to fit the game that you're playing.
Yeah.
Like we've had the example of someone who brings a sailor into a game set in a desert, and it's not going to work.
Yeah.
So it's like, and that's let alone an overpowered character for someone who's like, wow. That's really cool. Yeah. That's really cool.
That's what I sort of think about. But I guess sort of starting to talk about yours and sort of, because I know you've been really great, and I think I've stolen your templates from you from pre-generation generated characters before.
No, you've borrowed. You've been inspired by.
I was inspired by. I was very closely inspired by.
Well, it's funny, actually. Thank you. I'm really glad that they are inspiring because it's funny that actually I'll get into that in just a moment as well, because that's kind of part of the way I came into this. I like when you were talking about for the difference between conventions and library games for you, that you, because you have that chance for library games, they know a bit about what's coming up. They know what to expect. They know the game. And so you encourage them to make their own character for coming to these. So if I've got an ongoing library game, I like something that's 5 sessions or something, I'd probably have a session 0 where we can make a character each or something. I've done that in the past. For one-shots, I tend to, whether it's a con or anywhere, in fact, if it's more I don't know who's coming in, like a convention, I'll have pre-made characters as well, because I want to have that expectation met right away and also something that I know I can work with in the context of the game. That's going to be the introduction as well, that they can work together. So, but I might jump back. Guys, thank you in the chat as well, and welcome Hatter HRG just before I come in.
Hatter,
good to see you.
Good to see you.
And guys, please, let us know in the text as well in the chat if there's anything you're interested in hearing more about that we talk about, or if you've got things that you bring into a game as an introductory game that you feel is important. Anything that resonates with what we say is really great, or anything you'd like to add, we'd love to hear. So
please do. D and Dog is currently here if you're wondering why I'm doing this very strange kind of claw in the darkness.
And he's appearing every now and then. That's good.
He's appearing every now and then. He's a phantom dog. Oh, he's a displacer dog.
Well, for me,
yes. But yes,
there's something about, for one shot, and I think I'm really keen to work out what transfers to no matter what role-playing game that you do. So for me, I keep thinking about role-playing games. I really want to introduce the hobby, the activity of what that is, and that idea of bringing people together around a table to play. That the actual term of role-playing game, I actually really want to bring to life, as in you're going to play a role of a character, as is everyone else. You play that together in a story that you make together. And finally, it's a game, which means there's going to be some dice rolling, some chance, some things you won't have control over, but you will then be able to. Well, how do you respond to that? How do you enact to then finish the story in some way? So I really want to bring those elements in here as what is a role-playing game. Then there comes, and jump in at any time if there's anything that comes in. So that's one about the idea of a role-playing game, because that's I think common across any kind of one-shot introductory. There'll also be what's the style of the game, and I think we're talking about the expectations thing. I think is really important. So for Dungeons and Dragons, for example, generally high fantasy. There's a sense of heroism. There's a sense of the 3 pillars that I want to bring in. There's the social element of how they interact. There's how do they explore, and puzzles come into that as well, that investigate and find and learn and solve puzzles and challenges. And then there's combat. And like you said, combat's very specific and easy to jump into, and that's a really great way to kind of get people involved.
Yeah.
So it's having those expectations. You said about dice. I thought that was a big one.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think, like you said, the mechanics, what are the core mechanics? I love that you talked about tiered, and I've started looking at how I do that, and that's why that character sheet is important for
Yeah.
me, because the main character sheet you get for Dungeons and Dragons, there's a lot in that, and it's like,
Yeah.
I'm
It's a
not trying to
huge
dumb.
amount.
I love you said not trying to dumb down and patronize people by just thinking they can't handle it, but it's like I've been looking at that, and just from the experience of having a number of intro groups, I look at it and like, this is a lot. And it's like,
Yep.
we can do it bit by bit. And I think
Yeah.
there's something about that. I think there's a kind of a shepherding, a guiding approach to be able to say, here's the basics. You want to play a wizard? Well, here's how wizards work, and here's this.
Yep.
So it's like, instead of slots in a way, the best thing I could do is go, if you're a wizard or if you're a warrior, whatever it is, here's things you can do as often as you want. And it's just listed there. And anything else that takes slots or charges or once a day or whatever, I just put a white box or two white boxes or three
Next
and go,
to the
guys,
spell. Yep.
in this game, you can do this that many times. That's it.
Yeah.
And it's the same on every character sheet. So everyone goes, oh, okay, there's things I can do all the time. There's things I can only do a certain amount of times. And it just, idea kind of like gives that people the options of like, okay, I have to be careful with these ones because I can only do them so often, but these things I can do as often as I want. So it's,
and I really like sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, I really like that as a way of introducing spell slots, you know, because it's from what you were saying before, I think for you, it's that community, it's introducing people to the game is really important.
Yeah.
And part of that is still being true to those rules, right? Being true to the mechanics. And so slots are important. And you're keeping the spirit of that, but in a way that is easier for the players to follow. The usability, if I'm going to use my human factors kind of words, the usability is much higher, which I think is just fantastic.
Yeah, it's pretty. I'm kind of glad that it's kind of evolved to that point, and so I'm trying it out as well. There's a kind of like that character sheet you talked about, and I think I'd love to share one as well if people want to see what that looks like as an introductory one, because it's evolved so much over the last couple of years, and I've just kept refining it because I want to make that intro experience really enjoyable, not dumbed down, but like more empowering and like, I want to know more kind of thing, and that you have fun with it. So that's the base mechanics. That's what I want to introduce. But I also, something about that, so I've talked about the basics of a role-playing game, those things about working, being together at a table. The thing about that particular role-playing game, the genre, the D&D style of high fantasy, or if it's Cthulhu or horror, whatever it is, that kind of, and the base mechanics of how that works. Tiered if it was over a longer time, but then it's simple for this beginning. But I also have ones that are important to me, and this is more of the who are you, and I think this is about who are you as a GM, what's important in terms of establishing your table. Jared's mentioned this before, and I just want to shout out to him about this, about creating the safe space at the table is important to me too. I know you've talked about it too. And that for me is, I've got three main rules for that. I want to run a kind table, so people are kind to each other. I want a table where the rules are fair, which means that we put them out there, we adapt if we need to, if it's not working, so we can keep being fair with each other, and that it's across the table is fair. And lastly, this is about fun. So we're going to be learning, but it's not about getting it right every single time or whatever that idea of right is. We're learning and we're starting to get an idea of these things. In the end, let's just have fun. If everyone's having fun and you're watching it and they did something that's completely outside the rules, but they're getting the spirit of enjoying working together, it's like, go with it. That's more important to me.
Absolutely. And I love that about the games that you've run as well. It is very much about that spirit of collaboration, of having fun, and of all walking together. I apologize if you can hear D and Dog in the background. He is expressing an opinion on a person in a space that they are completely allowed to be in.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan Dog.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that consideration, actually, that's a really good point. The consideration of the different people at the table, and I think that sense of the kindness, the fair, and the fun is so much about adapting to the people at the table, and so therefore the
Yeah.
space is safe for this group of people in this way. And that's actually really every single time you run an intro, or that I run anyway, it's a different experience because it's adapting to those people as well. Is everything
Yeah.
okay with DM Dog? Because it was
Yeah, he's fine. I was just double checking. Sorry about that. I try not to be
no,
distracted.
no. He wants to be part of it.
He does.
So I think that's the baseline of what the kind of things that I'm looking at. I'm considering, then I start thinking about who am I engaging, because it's important to
Yeah.
me to understand. I've run games for 10-year-olds early this year, 10-year-old girls, which is hilariously mad, and it's like they have such imagination, so it's not the same D&D experience, and I really have to let go of the rules to enable those things to come about. And they've been playing with their mum, who's wonderful, has their own style, and so I'm actually kind of adapting to that.
Yeah, okay.
So they actually have experience in a way of playing a role-playing game.
Yeah.
But
I
that's
think
different.
it's
Yeah.
sorry, go on.
I was
I
just
was
going
gonna
to
say,
say that's. You go.
this is why we need a 3-shot. That we balance each other out in that.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think that's really interesting as well, because you're talking about having experienced players who are still kids and who have an approach to playing in the games that maybe isn't compatible with strict adherence to all of the detailed rules.
Because there's an expectation, and I think that's
Yeah.
part of that. I'm so glad that kept coming up about when you do a one shot, knowing the expectations that you're coming into. That game was also a personal, a direct client who contacted me to run it, so
Yeah.
they had a history already
Yep.
that I needed to invest in, and because of that,
Yeah.
kind of like you said, if you've got a story that people that you know who's coming on board, you can plan ahead for, you can get a bit more, you can give them a bit more leeway because you're helping work with them as they come into it.
Yep.
So a one shot for a convention is completely different. You don't know who's coming in. You don't have that kind of context. So for
Yeah.
me, I treat it as if whoever's coming to this is doing it probably for the first time, and if not the first time, they have limited experience. And so
Yeah.
I want to limit the basic rules, but have those core basics there just to intro.
Yeah. I think that's super important. Speaking of limitations as well, if we are thinking of one shots, they can be limited in terms of how long you have, of, if it's a convention, the place that you're going to be running it might have some aspects or factors that you need to consider. How do you sort of approach thinking about that?
I'm glad you asked as well, because it's funny, because you have to consider the place that you're going to be in. If you're going to be in a convention hall with a number of other tables, it's going to be a bit loud, and it's going to be, it is going to have that kind of sense of transitoriness about that people passing through. So it feels a bit lighter. You don't have to delve into stuff. You don't have to expect people to be more invested in that sense. They'll be flying in and flying out. And it's like, play it fast, play it in, have character sheets ready to go, welcome in as soon as you're there, introductions to everyone, here's it, you're thrown right into it, and then you just get into the game kind of thing. It's different in a library because we've got our own room, it's a bit quieter, we can actually have a bit of a chance to engage. It is still pretty similar in that sense if it's a one shot. But if it's one with a client, if I've been booked in for that, where it's a group of people who've been really keen, and I did I think there's something about, like you said, you have a chance to engage a little bit beforehand. So there's expectations you can learn about to adapt to their circumstances, their expectations, what they're into. And so you want a space, if it's going to be at somebody's house, that's a personal space, and that's they've set up a space in there, so you want to respect that as well. And so it's understanding the place you're going to be, who's going to be there, how loud you can be, things like that, what kind of language you can use. So that's kind of,
that's a big one.
Creating that safe space. I generally tend to have whatever the organisation that's engaged me, and the people who are coming on board help dictate that, and so that
Yeah.
I'll tailor to that in some way. So it is, yeah,
Yeah.
it's considering a few things, but it means
Yeah.
that people know what to expect, and they also
Yeah.
feel safe. It feels like, oh, I can do this here.
Yeah.
That's it. So
Here's a question with absolutely no notice whatsoever. What
sure.
do you think are the questions that a newer DM should ask going into that kind of different spaces? What are some of the things that you think is important to know to help shape your prep for
That's a really,
this?
really great question.
Mm.
If it's for players who are coming into a convention, most people, you won't have met them. In fact,
Mm.
I mean, it's like there'll be someone who's registered them probably, as we know from Collecticon. So you get some
Yep.
basic information, maybe ages, maybe a little bit of
Yeah.
experience, but otherwise not much. So I would want to ask as people coming in, hi, what's your name? Have you
Mm-hmm.
played before? How much have you played? Great.
Yeah.
Then let's introduce each other, and I try to get people to introduce each other to each other as
Yeah.
soon as possible, because I want to break that down, that kind of like
Mm.
uncertainty, and build that kind of connection. I usually try to pair up people like really quickly to say hi,
Yeah.
introduce each other with your character as well, and just tell them one thing you're really keen to play, so it can get
Yeah.
them to focus on the character but also on talking. And if they're focusing on the character, they're not feeling self-conscious because they're looking at the character at the same
Yeah.
time. So there's that whole thing of learning, how do you help people feel safe with people they've never met,
Mm.
and how do you engage that as everyone seems to be coming to the table with a similar kind of feel,
Yeah.
but there are different people who learn and act differently and have
Mm-hmm.
different ways of engaging. So it's like, how do you have little activities to help start that
Yeah.
off? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
You did ask me this, but I'm going to throw the question back at you. Do you have sort of
Okay.
a go-to that you go to, a go-to that you go to when, say, you're coming into a convention or you're coming into a one-shot where perhaps you don't have that ability to shape the people coming in or what they're going to do?
Yeah, it's a really good question. You know me, I love the hero's journey. So the 3 act
Mm-hmm.
structure is a good thing. 2 hours, I noticed Renato mentioned as well, 2 hours is really
Yeah.
great for a quick one
Yep.
shot to intro people to something fun, because people can just dive into it.
Yep.
And it's also, there's that, you don't have to commit to it in a way. It's kind of a nice
Yeah.
way to just jump in.
Mm-hmm.
So I break it up into 3 40-minute slots that fit into 2 hours, and there's no break. It's straight in,
Yeah.
because you can keep, it takes energy. So that's a
Mm-hmm.
thing. I'm exhausted at the end of it, but it's worth it. And you learn how to conserve it.
Yeah.
But for me, I've got to go to type of game, because I want to have the 3 pillars for D&D in particular.
Mm-hmm.
The initial intro, as people come in, of course, as we're welcoming, there's that little bit of time beforehand where you get a chance
Yep.
to give them a character, blah, blah, blah. But
Yep.
the first thing is to introduce them and to say, you're here in this place, whatever it is, and this is happening.
Yep.
For me, there's a
So that
game I
kind of
run.
like starts you here, character introductions. Yeah.
Yes. Low level, highly
Yep.
recommended. Start simple. Try not to be
Yeah, don't
first.
start with don't do a level 20 start.
No,
That's
no,
a
no.
lot.
Too many options. Too many options.
Yeah.
There's a game that I run that I love called Wild in the Streets, and it was taken from I think first or second edition. Second edition Dungeon magazine, I think,
Oh, wow.
from about 20, 25 years ago. But it's the simplest game, and I love it. And they start off, and they're in a town. They're all guards for a caravan. They've just been hired on, or they could have been there for a while, whatever it is. And the very first thing is they're meeting their new merchant they're going to be working for. So they have to introduce themselves.
Yeah.
And so they describe how they look and their whatever it is. And we do it as they're getting coffee or a drink or something, as they're sitting at the tavern. And I've described already, they're in the middle of a town square where there's a festival going on. And the guy they're working for has exotic animals and beasts like displacer beasts and an ankylosaurus for every dinosaur lover out there who wants to know what that is as well. In any
I go to
case,
Google.
yeah. Anyway, has a whole bunch of these, and they introduce each other first of all because he says they're going to take them and they're going to be guarding it. And of course, they
Oh.
never get to that because the moment they've all introduced themselves to enough, that's the social bit straight
Mhm.
away.
Yep.
And he'll quiz them with a couple of questions about their character and how they're going to help so that they
I
can
love
come up
that.
with something. But then, crisis. All of a sudden,
Mm.
one of the animals gets loose, and it's an ankylosaurus that is smashing its tail around and going
Yep.
amok. And it sets there's a fire that gets knocked over and sets this little tavern on fire over here. There's
Yep.
people running everywhere screaming, and there's a little kid crying, looking for his mum, like there. And I just set this up, and it's like, what do you do? Roll initiative.
Yeah,
And they're like,
nice.
what the hell? And it's like,
Nice.
they may be looking at their sheet, they may not. And I was like, it
Mhm.
doesn't matter, guys. What do you want to do with this going
Yeah.
on here? And just pointing
Yeah.
those out. So they've got a choice of where they want to engage. And the great
Mm.
thing is, there's a lot of things going on, so they have options. It doesn't have to be one person just going after
Mhm.
this. More than one person can help. And then they
Mhm.
have that scene to actually just try to actually deal with it. And
Yeah,
so,
awesome.
and he doesn't want the animals to be killed. He
Yeah.
needs to capture them. So there's that sense of, okay, how do we capture it
Yeah.
without killing, blah, blah, blah.
And
So
sets up the
there's
expectations
it.
of your table as well. That is, you're not gonna set up and run a game for murder hobos.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a good point. You're in
Mm.
control of the type of game you want to play. And it's like
Mm.
D&D, which I love, and I grew up in first edition, there was a lot of, there are goblins attacking the town, you've got to go kill them
Yeah.
and take them out because of this. And it's like, sure, let's do that. And today, I
Yeah.
don't feel like that anymore. I don't I had the issue come up with the Lost Mine of Fandelver, the very
Yeah.
introductory set, and the very first thing is goblin arrows. They start attacking you.
Mm.
What do you do? And it feels like you
Yeah.
have to attack and kill, but
Yeah.
you don't have to. You actually don't have to, but they're still
Yep.
painted as the enemy. And I thought,
Yeah.
you're a GM, you can establish how do you want people to engage? What's the style of story you want to have?
Mhm.
It could be complete war. You're at war with this group of whatever it is, and
Mhm.
you're fighting. How you're going to engage.
Yep.
That's the style of the game. And I
Yeah.
think it's important, whatever the scenes you set up, have to reflect what kind of game you want to run, how you want people, the expectations that people are going to have of when they're playing it. So,
Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's,
Okay.
yeah.
And then what happens after that? After the Alice, okay, I
Oh,
can't say it. Alamosaurus,
Ankylosaurus, it's a wonderful name. It's so long. I'll
the
type it in later.
Cankylosaurus.
Kind of can,
Got
yeah,
very
that'd be
thick
worse.
legs.
It's very thick-lipped.
Mhm. That's
It's
why it's aggressive. It's got
basically,
sore ankles.
I want to see one of those now. Um,
Yeah.
once they get that under control, you get everyone in. The town already is starting to love them as heroes for saving this little thing because they've managed to
Yeah.
stop fires and save
Aw.
kids and all that kind of thing. The Ankylosaurus has calmed down and is given some like lettuce or something to keep it calm. And then they find out that the caravan wagons, two of them have toppled over, and two of the things are
Ah.
broken open. And he describes the animals that have disappeared and gone run about into the town, and they have to find them, and they can't kill
Nice.
them, and that's it. They have to look for them. Um,
Awesome.
I don't want to say too much because it gives away a little bit about what you go
Yeah, we don't want it
after.
to be a spoiler stream,
No,
but
which is that's a funny thing, and I bring into it specific beasts that are known in D&D. So it's things that are interesting, but
yep.
the twist is that they're baby versions of them. So really great for kids. If you wanted to
Yep.
make it more intense, you could make it the adult versions. But I would
Mm.
say the fun about that is there's a cute factor to it as well. So
Yeah.
anyway,
And I
it's a
think
nice.
you said earlier, you talked about having lower level characters when we're looking at this kind of situation. And I agree. I think having lower level characters is easier for people to understand. I'd be curious on your view because I think level 1 can be interesting, but I would actually be more inclined to run level 1 with more experienced players because it's
Yeah.
essentially survival horror. Level 1, you can fall down some steps and that's it for your character.
Yeah.
Whereas for me, I tend to bring in my pre-mades at level 3 or level 5,
Yeah.
where things are starting to get interesting. What's your view on that?
It's funny. I do similar. I'm actually level 2 minimum. I never do level 1 if I can help it, because then also I give the example. I've been doing this the last few one-shots, letting people know most commoners have between 5 and 10 hit points at most. You've got 20.
That
so
is a good point.
get ready. And so it gives them that sense of
Yeah.
comparison. Oh, okay, we're a little
Yeah.
bit. First level wizard could probably be the same as a commoner, basically. So
Yeah.
it doesn't really give you that sense of difference. So, but I agree. I
Yeah.
think it gives you that just that little bit more to play with and to show that they're
Mm.
already kind of like stepping away from what most people in their lives deal with
Yep.
as a day to day, but
Yeah.
how they deal with it. Yeah. So it's interesting.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. We are starting to run out of our wonderful time.
Yeah.
Um,
It has been
but
great. And look,
it's been good. I
thanks for
was
the
going to say,
questions.
like, what would be your kind of, I guess, if you had to do a key takeaway? Oh gosh, that sounds so corporate. But if you had to come up with like a key message you wanted to take, we're going to pop it in. We're going to park that for the moment, and we're all going to work together so we can get a synergistic outcome that's the best for our stakeholders.
Yeah.
But seriously, what if you were going to sort of if something you wanted people to really take away from what we've talked about tonight, what would that be for you?
I think as an introductory, if you're trying to run an introductory game, particularly, I think this is also out there to GMs, first time GMs, because there's so many people I've met in one shots who are playing for the first time but want to run their own game and are terrified that they're not sure where. It's not so much terrified, it's just not knowing where to start. And the best thing, my takeaway from this, or something I would recommend, keep it really simple. Go with stuff that people have used before, like a one-shot game. Just grab stuff that's already there. Magpie, just take anything.
Yeah.
Keep it really simple. And just as like this, take that idea that I was saying, or take anything that you think is a really good, simple 2-hour, simple game that gives a few options for people just to have fun with, and just try it. Just like you said, Thea, I love what you said about giving the chance for people to just try it without worrying about how the rules work, and going with the limit of the rules you know. You don't need to know all the rules. Just go with the sense of the genre and the fun that you want to have.
Yeah. I love that. And yeah, rules, I think we've talked about a lot, are not there to constrain. They're there to support and, enable everybody to be having fun, including the GM, especially if you're the first timer GM. If you don't have fun running games, we're not going to have any GMs. You deserve to have fun too.
You're one of the players, and that's an important point as a GM. I think you are one of the players, and all you're doing is helping guide what you feel the group wants to play anyway. So it's like, play.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same? Is that what you would have as a takeaway?
Absolutely, as a takeaway, indeed. I'll take that on board. But yeah, no, I agree. I think it's you only need enough to keep things fair and keep things fun.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely applying that in my Star Trek: The Adventure.
Hey, that's a perfect segue. Thank you for that, because, guys, we are wrapping up now. Look, I saw the time as well. Thank you, guys in chat. Thank you as well. I love some of the thoughts there. Welcome, Snyder Nix, as well. Didn't see you before.
Yeah. Hope you found that magazine, Snyder Nix. I know you were going looking for it.
We do have to wrap up for this week. Thanks for joining us on the Social Pillar. Join us next week. If you want to continue these conversations, by the way, you can do. We'll get into that in just a sec. But we have a new conversation coming up, which is a new format that we're going to be bringing in every now and then throughout the year, and it's introductions to role-playing games. So next week we're doing our first for the year, and yes, we've been hinting at it all session. Star Trek Adventures, brought to you by Thea. We're going to have a look at it.
Oh my gosh, did we foreshadow?
Maybe foreshadowing was involved. Yes.
You know what I love is that we didn't even intend to do that. It just happened. So next week we will be talking a little bit more in depth about Star Trek: The Adventure. I suppose I should read more of the rule book before then, but I have it. It's very pretty. Yeah. Can you imagine sitting there? And this is Star Trek: The Adventure. You can see it as a book. It has a hardcover. It's got some very, very lovely illustrations. And that's all we have time for. But I will know more.
Rick, I can't wait, because I'm a big Star Trek fan. For everyone out there who's a Star Trek fan, I'm very keen to see how the role-playing game runs. That'd be really great. Live long and prosper. So how we'll get onto that next week. In the meantime, how can we check out our socials there?
Yeah, please do join us on Discord. That is where we have our community. We are still building our community. I'm certain that some excellent person will very shortly put a link to the Discord in the chat, because we have all the amazingness. Look at that. It's almost as if we have an eye in the sky watching over. If you want to catch any of our old episodes, have a look on our YouTube channel. So we have all of our first year's episodes up there on YouTube. You can also catch them as VODs here on Twitch, but you can't catch all of them. There are 2 missing, and it is an Easter egg. And I will give a mini to anyone who figures out which 2 are missing, and I will, because I have a mini that I've been meaning to give as a prize.
The first person.
Not
every
good
person.
Point. The first person. Thank you very much. Yes. But yes, so that, and join the Discord, check us out on YouTube, check us out here on Twitch, interact. It does help us out. We are trying to grow this wonderful community, because as beautiful and amazing as Ian and Jared are, there's so many more beautiful and amazing people out there, and I want to meet all of them, every single one, and add them to my collection. I'm a friend dragon, and you are my horde.
Thank you, friend dragon. Thank you, everyone, as well, for joining the conversation in our chat and everyone watching. Like they said, your support really helps bring and build the conversation about role-playing games around the world and just the fun and joy that we get out of it. So thank you. We love you all. Take care. We'll see you next week. And I believe we may be raiding. Is that correct?
Yeah, there is a cute little group that are doing a live play. They're playing Dragonlance, and over on Dorktales. So we might. Oh no, wait! It's a rerun. Do we want to watch a rerun? Let's not do that. I just realised it is a rerun. Who else have we got? Let's go to the Coastal Conclave. Our friends up the south coast.
Oh, cool.
With their live play. Let's go there. So yeah, we're going to head up and say hi to the Coastal Conclave. Conclave. Again, me with the words. It's been fun, Ian. I love you. We did it. We survived.
Love you too, Jared.
We love you too, Jared. We can see you. And will I thank you, everybody in chat.
Love you guys in the chat. Thanks for your support. And keep the conversation going. We'll see you guys next week.
See you soon. Bye. Mwah.